I am really glad to be back with Kristin Eno and Richard Lewis. Richard is a quick introduction. He's a poet, he's a teacher, he's a writer, and a spinner of magical thinking. And Kristin is a studio teacher working in a Reggio-inspired school at the moment, and an incredible filmmaker who captures the wonderful world of childhood. So it's wonderful to have them back. As we awake from the induced dormancy that many of us suffered from during this pandemic, it brings to mind the very meaning and the impact that this sleep has had on all of our lives. Sleep has been an interesting problem for every human being over the past 15 months. We are, in a sense, all waking up from a collective sleep. Many have been teaching children who may or may not have been sleeping, dreaming, forgotten how to do either. We've lived through a surreal time, which some might have considered a nightmare, which has left all of us, teachers, children, and parents, needing to rest and recover before embarking on classroom learning in the fall. Richard and Kristin are hoping to provide a breath of wonder, a spark of inspiration when all the teaching profession are feeling pretty exhausted and ready for a refreshing revival. Our last conversation that we had, three of us, on December of 2020, left us asking, what are some of the questions we ask children to move them into a space of wonder? In preparing for this conversation, we kept returning to the children's questions. We realized the importance of listening closely to children's questions so that their wonderings could form the basis for exciting emergent threads that could take children on journeys of exploration that would revive their spirits, wounded by pandemic teaching and learning and needing desperately to come alive again. Richard, what are you thinking about all of that?
Well, Renee, the word dreaming came to my mind immediately. And you were talking about how we all suffered from this pandemic world that we lived in, and we spent time perhaps dreaming a lot. And that's kind of led me to your other question, which is the listening to children. And one of the things that's so fascinating with children is their ability to apply dreaming to not only themselves, but to things of the world. We are not the only dreamers. There might be other dreamers out there. And I've always felt that when children are playing, particularly if they're playing with an object, they're listening to the dreaming of the object itself. They're actually talking to the object. And the only way you can talk to an object, as an example, if I have a stone here, right, and I'm looking at it carefully and I'm talking to it, I have to admit then that the stone is listening to me. If the stone is listening to me, I can probably hear what it's hearing of me. And so we're talking together, maybe in a language that none of us except the two of us understand. And we're in a sort of an arc of dreaming itself. And one of the marvels of talking to children about dreaming in particular is that there's no boundaries to it, because children don't have a specific boundary sometimes with what we call a dream. I can take from the stone, watch me carefully, I can take from the stone a little bit of the dream the stone is having, and I can take it between my two fingers and open it up, and it goes back into the sky. Now, if I ask the group of children, is anybody in the room, can you recover that dream from the sky? I will guarantee, total guarantee, money back if it doesn't work, that there will be somebody, some child, no matter what age, who will raise their hand and say, Richard, I've got the dream you put up in the sky. So already my question is pivoting on the invisible. And once a question pivots on the invisible, we've hit a home run, so to speak. We're out there. We can go in any place we want to go with our questions. Excuse me. And That leads us then to not only listening to children, but listening in concert with our own dreaming and the dreaming of children itself, the questioning of children themselves. Um, so my suspicions are, as we come out of this pandemic, we have to kind of wake up. Look what I'm doing. Wake up and look at the world again. You know, it's there. It is, everybody. It's out there. And what do you see? And let's say we're back in our classrooms and they say, well, we only see our desk. No, 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 no. I don't want to just look at the desk. I want to see what you really see. And then the next hand might go up and they say, well, we see, let's see, we see a little light in the room. Oh, light. That's a wonderful thought. Now, where is the light coming from? And suddenly hands go up because this is a good question. Where does the light come from? And the hands go up and let's say, and particularly one child says, well, it comes from outside. Oh, wonderful. Can you kind of take a little of the outside light and bring it inside the room? So now we're into gesture. And that's the beautiful part of asking questions, because we don't just ask with our mouths speaking, we answer with our gesturing, as children will do. So we also get into the playful mode, which is how to bring the light from the outside inside. Now, there's always going to be somebody in the classroom who will say, let's open the window, right? And which is fine if you wish to have the window open. But if the window can't open, as it does sometimes in schools, you can't get the window open. We still want to bring the light and the air from the outside. So we have to then resort to the magic of our hands, of our imagining, of all kinds of strategies that children are masters at, which is play. And we begin to play. And we begin to play with the question, how to bring the light from the outside. So I would assume somebody might take a little bit of like their hands with a little telescope and do this and say, well, let's look, and maybe the eye will arrive back in my eye, and I can take the light that's in my eye, pull it out of my eye and put it on the desk. Wonderful. So now we have yet another major question. What is light? What is light? Can you feel it? Can you hear it? Can you touch it? Does it grow? Does it shrink? Does it stand on its head? What does it do? All right. So already the invitation has been made. And my hunch is we have to get children back to that quality of play where there's nothing around it except the aspect of play itself. There's no agenda that we have. No child is going to be tested on this. No, excuse me, no child is going to be asked to see what you've learned about this. It's going to be the pure pleasure of playing with a concept, with an idea. Let's just say light for the time being. So the exploration then begins. How do you make this long term? And we might go back to a very simple strategy, of, as I always do, which is you take a little bit of paper. If everybody has a little paper on their desk right away, it's always good to have paper. You never know. And you don't have to write on it, but you take the light that you found in your eye and you put it on the piece of paper like that. You fold the piece of paper. So now everybody in the class has a little bit of light. And then with that little bit of light, we can wrap it up like that so it feels comfortable and warm. Light tends to get a little chilly at night, so we keep it warm like that. And every day we can open up our little piece of paper with light and see what it's been dreaming. You see what I'm doing? What it's been dreaming. And you take that little bit of light and you look at it and you see, oh, it's been dreaming of nighttime. That's interesting. I never thought that the light just dreams of nighttime. And what does it dream when it dreams of nighttime? Well, it dreams about waking up at the middle of the night and wondering what's outside, whatever. So it goes on and on. So the dialogue is in the children's hands now. We are just the provocation of the dialogue, the quality of thinking that keeps asking further questions, but allows the children to take those questions, expand on them, open them up, and then always to preserve them. So at the end of the time that we're playing here, we put the light back into the little piece of paper like that, wrap it up. Now, some of you might just want to take it home, right? So that's fine. If you want to take it home, do two things. Be sure to put it close by your bed so you can hear what it's saying in the middle of the night. Or if you don't want to hear anything, just keep it close by your bed. And in the morning, pick it up. And do, please, everybody listen to me, do not forget to bring it to school, because light is very jealous. It loves to go where you go. And where you go is where light goes. And if you bring it in the morning, then all of us can share personally your separate and beautiful light that we have. So then you can go into all kinds of activities from here. Let's draw what the light looks like.
Yeah.
Let's make a ball of light.
Yeah.
Let's take even a marble like that and introduce the marble to the light that's inside. Let's do all kinds of things that open up what seemingly sounds very abstract, but is around us every day. Now, there's no child, I will guarantee this, who won't buy into this marvelous moment of wonder, going back to our discussion of wonder, that what we're taking is one of the great wonders of our consciousness, which is the idea of light itself, that we see. And by seeing, we open up things, we give light to things, we understand things, and that gives light to something. So what we have to do is take the particles, the simplest particles of experience, and work from those. And so this long-winded way of my saying this, the pandemic opens itself to the nature of light itself.
Mhm.
And that we can go outside again. We can experience light. We can be a part of light. We can actually physically feel light against our eyes, but also against the experience of being outside. So all of that is another way of taking the simplest but most complex phenomena. Light, the question about light goes on and on and on. If you want to get astronomical about it, we can begin to say, well, where did it begin? Where did light come from? Wonderful question. Mysterious as ever, because we can go both scientifically on this and we can go purely on a kind of sensual, marvelous, exploratory world that light may have exploded from another light that went back yet to other light. Whatever children come up with, let them begin the journey of wondering. And
I
it is.
love I love that journey, Richard. The idea that you starting with with this fanciful thinking, this
Yes,
very magical thinking, and
yes,
then it can go into something else. It can be, but the
very
idea, I
true.
think the idea, from my point of view, is that to understand that time is important here also.
Yes,
That 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 especially after this year, the idea of leaving breathing space
yes,
and time to like pull this out, see where
yes.
children want to pull it out, you know. And that makes me think of a little bit of what Kristin, your spider story.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe Kristin could share this spider story, because it actually makes, in my mind, makes a connection here to
Yes,
what you were just saying,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
And I am so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you, Renee, for hosting again. And we're picking up where we left off in December. And it was such a great conversation, but it was the beginning of winter, COVID winter, the first we had ever known. What would that be like? And how dark that was. And we were on the cusp of winter, and now we're already into summer. So we have so much time, as you said, time is in between our last words, and we're picking up the thread again. Richard, every time you speak, I always think to myself, why didn't I call Richard every week? Or why don't we talk more? Or why didn't I read his
I
book
feel that way.
this morning before I went into school to do my work with children? I have many of your books. I love your books. They're not worn enough, but just when you were talking about light, you helped us to take flight while standing still. We're sitting here,
Yes.
but we're taking flight. And that's what your workshops have done for me over 20 years. That's what your workshops have done for children and other educators and anyone who knows you. And so thank you, Richard, for your work and for being here with us. And thank you, Renee, for making this happen, because we need to keep wondering. We have to keep, I mean, given the context of this year, it's a desperate quest. Like, we must get back to the light, and we must get back to wonder. What does it look like to wonder in a pandemic? For me personally, and Renee mentioned the spider story, so I want to sort of take you there to this special story that happened in my last teaching job in New York during the pandemic. So I'll take you there, but just to give you a little context, in December when we spoke, I was only teaching remotely. So I would go onto Zoom with 2, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds every day of, I guess, September through March. So that was a huge heavy weight for me, and the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my, at least in my professional career. And it just called upon endless quantities of strength, but I really struggled with the wonder piece. So sorry I didn't call you more, Richard, because I needed that encouragement, but I did learn a lot just in the slow going, trek of the year. But by the time that things started to open up and I was able to go back in person, part-time, so I was still working part-time on remote teaching and part-time back in the classroom. It really brought life and light and wonder back to me. So within that moment, what it looked like would be that I would see every class or every pod, smaller class, of masked children either once a week or once every 2 weeks. And for this particular class that I want to tell you about, I only saw them every 2 weeks, and they were 3, turning 4. Wonderful 2 groups of this class. So I'm going to talk just about one group because a certain thread materialized just for the one group because it was an experience that we had. So I'll show you a little bit about it. Before that, I just want to say another aside from both of you who have been mentors to me, I just want to mention one of my favorite educators and just say that Vivian Paley is really alive in my teaching all the time. I think about her all the time. And this is maybe my favorite, the girl with the brown crayon. I just was reading this before we started. I was thinking, often when we're working with children, what is that magic? What is that magic? Because Richard, you have that magic and you just showed it to us. That magic is a gift, and it's a really special gift. So Vivian definitely had that, and she also had the magic gift of being able to convey that to us. Like, what is that to really pull you in? And so this particular book is about a little special soul, and named Rini, who's in her kindergarten class. And so the whole book is about Rini through Vivian's eyes. And of course, there's a story that I can't tell you the whole story. You have to read the book. You will cry, so be careful. Each year, I wait to be reawakened by a Rini, just as she has entered school looking for a Frederick. And that's Leo Leone's Frederick, of course. A something to ponder deeply and expand upon extravagantly. Okay, so for this particular story I'm going to show you, there is a Rini, and his name is Will. And so he found a spider. Maybe the whole group found the spider, but it's kind of a story a little bit about Will. you can decide what you want it to be about, but I think it's also a story about community and listening and wonder. And so hopefully we can look at what that looks like, how we draw that out as teachers, like what does it take to bring the children to a place of wonder, and what does it take to hear their questions, to really hear them. So in April, this group started with clay. And it looked like this, like a block of clay. So this is kind of what the work was looking like. Very interesting and sensory and very healthy for all 3-year-olds to touch clay at least once a week, if not more. I mean, you can do so much. You can look through it. It could be your telescope. We talked about telescopes in December, and I mean, children will find a way. But it could also be pieces for everyone. And that's what this child wanted it to be, pieces for everyone. And that drew everyone over. That was magnetic. It was for everyone. And this was a beautiful moment. I took some photos and I listened to the children's words, and I made a little book that they were here. You can see them reflecting on their clay work. This child was making a Zamboni. It was polishing off the ice rink. You just never know. Clay can be anything. But right after that class, and this is a sort of segue, but let's just imagine we're still in the classroom, and it's right next to the yard at this preschool. And so you can see the yard out the window, and it's very easy to go to yard after studio. And so the children went to yard after studio, and usually because I had 5 classes a day, or, a lot of different places I had to be for studio, I would go on my way to my next class or to my desk and, rework the materials. And I usually didn't go to the yard with the children, but today something changed, and somehow I ended up out there with them. And it became known that there was something in the corner of the yard. So here's our friend Will checking it out. And I mean, there was a lot of looking. And can you see something in the upper, almost left corner, center of the screen? You can see our friend the spider. There was much conversation. And at this point, what you're seeing is screenshots of my video. So Will and I started talking about the spider. Various other friends knew that the spider was there. They would run over and run away. They started to play a spider game, a spider-nake or spider-snake game. So they were making a transformation, an imaginative kind of creature that had spider-like characteristics. It was really interesting. There were many conversations, but I took it upon myself to record and to listen to our conversations. So we're seeing the spider, we're looking closely, and Will starts to tell me things like, the spider, it's moving around. It has another little bug near it. It's resting. It's still resting. So there was so much observation that he was able to tell me all of these things. And at one point he said, it's sleeping. The spider is sleeping. Yep. And so, of course, the first thing, now here's another friend, but the first thing that came to my mind when he said that was, how long is he going to sleep? How long do you think the spider will sleep? Well, we had to think about that. So we started to ask the friends. We asked all the friends who came over. They thought about it. They really did. And they talked about it. And then some started to maybe count. And this friend was going like this. They sleep this long. And then he's counting how long it might be. He says a lot of numbers. I wasn't quite sure what he got to, but the conversation continued and the looking continued. And I kept trying to use my video, the video camera as a microscope of sorts, because we didn't have a magnifying glass with us. So I used the close up, you know, and I zoomed, but I also, and of course I was taking in the audio of their conversation as they were observing. And this friend just stayed the longest and he had the most questions. And so I made sure to, you know, to continue a conversation with him. And I think looking back, it's sort of seeing our role as the educator, kind of highlighting that question, or, you know, how long does the spider sleep? Maybe he didn't ask that, but maybe he was really wondering that. So how can we get to the point where we're sometimes verbalizing what a child might be thinking? So we discussed creatures, crickets, the sounds they make, and the friends discussed the spider further, about the legs, the body, the shape. You know, some looked at it and came over to draw. Here's one spider. It was a very exciting community moment, as all are when these sort of magic happens like this. Here's two different children drawing the spider. And this was all just happened kind of not planned, of course, because I wasn't usually in the yard teaching studio. But the conversation continued, and there he is describing a little creature that he saw in the web next to the spider. And so at this point, it was almost time for their class to go back inside for lunch. And I asked if we could ask, or actually, I think it was either me or the other teacher. The other teacher would teach two groups, and so go back and forth and knew more of the 3-year-olds as well as this group. And so amongst Tanya and myself, the teachers in the yard, we started saying, you know, I think the buttercups might know the answer. The buttercups are experts in spiders. Maybe we should ask them. So I pulled out a piece of paper and I asked Will and Izzy and the friends to help me figure out what to ask or how to write a letter to the buttercups. So we did that. And I wrote down the children's words. I asked them several options to try to understand what they wanted to know. And I asked Will to sign it. So he did. Dear Buttercups, there's a spider in the corner of the step in the yard, right next to the door to the choose room. We think you will like the spider because you love spiders. We have a question for you. Do you know how long spiders sleep? Love the apple blossoms. 2 weeks pass. And the clay comes out. And the clay looks a little different this time. I did ask some questions. I did cast their minds back 2 weeks before. And I did pull out some spider books. When children started to ask questions, I said, well, let's find out. Let's look at some spiders while we're making spiders. Here's the spider walking with the fingers while he's making a spider. He's saying, this is a new way. And then the children started to discuss the idea of making a web across from one spider to another. And they did. And many children wanted to count the legs as they made them. So we brought the book out right after this point when he asked, well, there's a body and legs, but what else does it have? Okay, let's look, let's find out. This is my web, said this child. This is his web. More spiders everywhere and lots of counting of legs. Some faces, lots of personality, more counting, and then 2 more weeks. So this time we looked at the video together. So here we are sharing the video and looking together again to see what was that spider doing? Was it sleeping? Is it still out there? Is it still sleeping? What's going on? What if we drew the spider today instead of just made a spider in clay? Maybe we want to draw it. But we had the clay too. And you can see Tanya in the background. We're taking notes the whole time as the children were making. And for me, looking back and thinking about this really special question, how long do spiders sleep? And thinking about this work that the 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds were doing, it leads me to wonder if a question is just a really powerful tool that helps us to validate the child's interest in something like a spider. Here, this one I really like because each one is a spider. So many. But I wanted to say this, it offered up so much for collaboration when the spiders connected to each other or to their web. And just, you could just see the thinking blossom as we went deeper into the sleeping question, the question of what body parts does a spider have, and every other kind of question that the children were asking or that we were listening for and repeating to them. It sort of brings me back to Vygotsky and thinking about that scaffolding that we're doing and how the zone of proximal development might look like a ball or a block of clay. It might look like a spider. So what's our role to take the children to another more complex level of thinking? And in this case, making, engineering a web. And then we went into snakes. So that might have had to do with the game that they had created 2 weeks before or 3 weeks before, I'm sorry, even a month ago. It might somehow the spider and the snake were connected in their minds. And so here, of course, you're seeing snakes happen from at least 2 children that day. But of course, the web has really taken on a life. And then the book took on a life of its own. And I noticed some letters that were being recycled, and I thought, let's reuse those and turn them into our title. So it really became another level of community building and excitement about our spiders. They chose that title, and Will helped me put the title together and glue it, and there you have it. So that was a special moment. There's his spider that he drew on the R. Thank you for letting me share that story. It was really a highlight of my teaching life this year. So, and it brings up a lot, and I'm interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, I mean, I just think that it's so marvelous that you can pick up on one thing and have children really make it their own when they're allowed to do that, you know, and how far they can go with it. And how you use the word scaffold, you scaffold it along, but it was the children, they were taking it someplace. And, you know, that to me makes so much connection to what Richard was talking about. And these were very young children, like 3 and 4. I mean, I could see the same thing going somewhere with 7-year-olds, you know, or 8-year-olds. And it would be so interesting to see where they would take it, you know. I found that part so interesting. Richard, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree with you. I think, Kristin, it was a marvelous journey you took with the children, or they took with you, you know, as you kind of collaborated. One of the things I kept thinking about, if you had had more time with them, was my particular frame of mind about these things. not only how long does the spider sleep, but two things. What was what happened when the spider woke up? And do spiders dream? And if so, what was the spider dreaming?
That's so wonderful. I love that.
Because going back to this analogy we're using about waking up from the pandemic, uh, to use this framework of what you did with the children as a kind of maybe an almost unconscious metaphor for what we were all going through, and now we're waking up, and this waking up process um, is equally as fascinating, and also waking up to a world that has changed. And children, I suspect, feel that and suspect that they also sense that the world is very different from the world it was, a month ago or 2 months ago or 3 months ago.
Absolutely.
So I could just see wonderful, ways of extending the initial question into yet another question, but actually follows our own sense of waking up as well. Gee, if the spider woke up and saw this or saw that or felt this or felt that, what in fact did you feel this morning when you woke up? I wonder what you felt. And of course, that would obviously, particularly with that age group, open up wonderful, wonderful arena of responses. Um, and then the other piece of the puzzle, which I thought also was fascinating, when the child was drawing the web and you were looking very closely at this habitat of the spider, um, to enlarge upon that habitat, to include all the other creatures that were living around it. But the spider was not alone, that even though it looked like the spider was on its own, all kinds of things were going on in and around the life of that habitat of that spider. And how to open the habitat to not just other creatures, but to the children themselves, so that the children become part of the world of the spider itself. You understand what I'm saying? Where you're beginning to communicate with you communicate with each other, but you're communicating with the spider and vice versa. And there's a conversation beginning between spider and myself or the child.
That's beautiful.
And what are they thinking? What are they doing? And the
Right.
spider's opinion, about what it sees of the children, and how maybe the spider might be a little annoyed, that somehow its location was discovered and people were staring at it. And then allowing the children to be put in the place of the spider as if they have this whole world of children staring at them. And what does that feel like? So it opens up a million possible, routes you could take with it. And if it was done in a way that it becomes, going back to what you were saying, Renee, about a breathing space. I like that phrase, the idea of a breathing space in a room where we come and we all kind of share the breathing space that we are ourselves, but all the other aspects of the world that are breathing with us, whether it's the spider or the light, as I mentioned earlier, or it's all the bevy of things in the world that are part of the breathing that is the world itself. So you can extend beyond and beyond, beyond, and it opens up a universe, basically. So I think what's so exciting about what you did, Kristin, is you found the universe. There was that child found that universe. And it's interesting that the child found that universe, began to converse with that universe. Then you began to share that universe. So that universe in turn opens up other universes. So it can just multiply beyond, one universe sort of begins to open up the other aspects of other universes, and you can go on and on. There's no ending to it. So going back to breathing space, then I can imagine in every classroom a special breathing space in which all of the universes that have been discovered in a period of time that are waking up can inhabit that breathing space. And maybe waking up is in fact an image or a theme that we work with. Um, the world is waking up, we're waking up, things are coming back. We're beginning to go outside. We're experiencing things that we didn't experience. We're taking off our masks. What an amazing moment that is, right? Breathing air the way we didn't have a chance to breathe air all these months. So how to link the spider as the instigator of the marvel of other universes, but letting that spider be on the throne of its own universe, that it was the one that instigated the whole
That's right.
conversation between the child and itself.
That's
Uh,
so great.
and the
That's so
multiple
great.
things, that leads to. So going back to teaching for a minute and teachers, this is why these conversations we're having now with each other are so important to have, I think, with teachers who are working within the classroom at all stages. I don't care what age it is, all stages, and how to free them up from the squareness sometimes of curriculums, so you can kind of make it fluid, so we can talk about the kinds of things we're talking about with teachers and open up a conversation now between the universe of the teacher's world, the mind of the teacher, maybe even bringing it back to that beautiful moment the child discovered the spider, and the spider becomes the teacher of the child. It's stillness, it's mystery, if I can put it that way, of that unsolved question. How long was the spider asleep? Only the spider knows that, right? And so you open up, you provoke the adult mind with the child's mind, with the spider mind. Do you see what I'm trying to say? It's a linkage between all these elements of life. And you make a kind of community of that life, which in turn then becomes part of a room that when those children enter the room along with the teacher, that community is literally, even though it might be invisible on some level, it's there. And it's how to talk, let me say this, how to talk about things we don't necessarily see, but we might know, we might intuit. And young children, particularly, are masters of playing with that possibility. We forget that so much of their play is with the unknown, with what is intuited. They're searching through play to make something that they can't see come alive. And they are the teachers of ourselves. So to get them into that conversation is wonderful.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I just,
one other thing.
yeah.
One other thing that I always love doing, if I can possibly figure a way of doing it on an administrative side of things, is to bring young children into a classroom of fifth graders, say, or sixth graders, and have them talk about the spider in this case, right? And bring in the fifth graders, the 10-year-olds, into this conversation about the spider. And let then this conversation of the different age groups interconnect. And sometimes 10-year-olds, even though not all of them do this, but they kind of get to a point where they say, oh, that's kids stuff, that's childish stuff. But once there's a conversation opened between the age groups, it opens up a kind of sense, you mean we still can think that way? We still can talk about spiders asleep and how long they've been asleep and all the things that go with that. So using children in the best sense of using the power of their own childhood to open up other childhoods at the same time, not just adults, but childhoods, that are in the same institution, same school, same environment, how that can make a possible link.
Richard, I was thinking when you were saying this that I agree with you that this way of playing and this way of thinking
Yes.
so natural for children, and perhaps less natural for teachers and adults. But I think that if we can value what they're doing, let go a little bit, and go with the flow of it, I think it would open so much up. And
Yeah.
it kind of speaks a little bit also to the last Zoom conversation that I had with principals, 4 principals, and one of the principals of a school that's in a particularly like a neighborhood that's been so challenged by the pandemic. And she's been keeping up communication with the children, and like lunchtime meetings that she's had with them to kind of cull what they're thinking about and all that. And she said what she realizes is that what all of them want is play, play, play. And she said they're definitely dedicating at least the first 2 months of when children come back to play, But but I agree with that. I think it's wonderful. But I think you're adding another dimension, both of you, to what can come out of the children's play if we are listeners, not if we're directing their play, but if we are listeners and we can build on what we can
Yeah, absolutely.
build on it.
And it might just look like watching that play. I mean, that's as easy as that. Just film a little bit of it and watch and see what they talk about, what they notice. I remember watching a presentation from Anji, China, the special playgrounds there, and how the children watch the videos of the playground play on another day, and they reflect. So what is that? What's the potential there? That's amazing. And so we only did it just the once. I wanted to use it as a provocation. Some of the things that they probably lost in the replaying of the video, they might not have been able to hear. I was able to hear in a different sitting and transcribe. And so I would have wanted to use more of that with them and take that back to them and say something like, because this is a transcription of what I showed you. I wasn't able to read the notes as I was doing the slideshow, but they were playing the game while the spider was being discovered. The game was the spider snake. And how do you play that, James? He says, we snatch a ball. Whoever does this 10 times wins. Who won? I did. Well, what do you know about this spider over here, James, that Will's looking at? It eats pepperoni. And then Izzy comes up and says, it eats mac and cheese. And then there's Will still over there looking down into the hole and says, there's another really, really tiny bug with it. And then I say, oh, it moved. When you tap the grass, it moved. Do you think it noticed you? And Will says, no. You see, when you get close to it, it moves. It's really tiny. I saw something crawled on there. And then that was the moment in which he said, it looks like it's asleep now. And then I said, how long do spiders have to sleep? I do not know. Well, how can we find that out, Will? Maybe if we come back in a few hours and see if it's awake. So that was his first idea. And then a few minutes later, after I did some little interviews, I was asking different children, different questions, some about the spider, some about the buttercups. How do you know that they know about spiders? And then one child came up and said that she had found a part of a toy spider. So the conversations were kind of going different ways. But then at a certain point, which never materialized into a project, Will also said, we need to make a map. We can make a map so the buttercups know where the spider is. So the map stops here so that the buttercups will know the spider is here. And so again, they had to go back in for lunch. We had to finish the letter. There was no, so I love thinking with you, Richard, about what could come next. And I think it's helpful and healthy for teachers to go through scenarios like this, and also just to practice listening. Like we were just, yes, they need to play for extended longer than they they might have without COVID? Yes. But how are we listening to their play? And so that's both of your points. You're both saying that, and I agree. It's so important that we do, because I think that maybe we're all, even though we're back alive and breathing with and don't have a mask on, maybe in the fall, or maybe they still will. It's still such a long road that they've been through, like a fourth of their life like this, if they're that young, right? And I work with some even younger, and there's sort of a, in the back of the mind, kind of maybe desperation that can be living there and that we're trying to work against. So that's why it's such heavy work for teachers, because that quiet desperation of the child, like, what does the child really think? Yes, she's playing her snake game in the yard and she seems so happy, but what really helps that child maybe even more is to listen to that play and to help her build on it back in the classroom with stories, with books, with things they're creating through every material. And we believe that every material is a language, right? So if clay doesn't speak, then drawing might, or storytelling might, or story acting in the way that Vivian did. There's so many languages that's our job, is to, help the children become proficient so they can tell their stories and so they can heal in this case.
Yeah, may I just say one thing? I think, Kristin, you brought up another interesting question, another point. It's equally as important now for teachers. Teachers must be given the space to dream the way children are dreaming, thinking, feeling, playing. So I have a project which I'm proposing to the world at this moment, that there be a lunchtime meeting of teachers in a school, perhaps an imaginary school somewhere. And the name of the lunchtime meeting is, how long does a spider sleep? And we spend the lunch hour eating and thinking, well, how long do spiders sleep? And as that conversation opens up, it opens up the universe once again of the world around us. Because the spiders are waking, we're waking, and teachers are going to have all kinds of wonderful, wonderful ideas of exactly the question the children were asking of you and of themselves. That question shouldn't be just reserved for the child. It should be equally shared with the adult community. And once we get to that point where the same questions that children are dealing with, again on that level, they become the same questions that teachers deal with. And that so when the teacher can come into a classroom and say, hey, I think I have an answer to that question. And the children lean forward and they say, what, Richard? What? How long did the spider sleep? And he said, well, it's going to take me a while to tell you, but if you're patient, I'll be able to figure it out with you, and I have an answer. And so we're all on pins and needles waiting for us to talk together again. So what I'm assuming here, perhaps thinking about, is this shared conversation between the adult, the child, and the rest, and the spider, of course. We mustn't leave the spider out. When spiders are left out, you know what they do? I'm asking you, both of you. What do spiders do when they're left out?
Ample their feet with anger.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They pull you into their web.
Go into their web, yes. And they in other webs, they hide, right? So you don't want to be seen. They're going to say, you've been minding my business too much, so I want to be alone.
Or
Anyway,
maybe they'll leave a message like Charlotte did.
they could easily leave a message like Charlotte did, yes, or whatever they think, and we become that spider. That's the key. How to become the very thing that the child is speaking about.
That's so good.
So to kind of wrap up a little bit, I guess, because I think we do have to wrap up. We could talk forever, but it's I like what you're saying at the end, because it really speaks to the idea of the comfort of community
Yes.
and the importance of community. And the community goes beyond your classroom into your school and your colleagues, and to actually um, um, give everybody the permission to re-enter childhood,
Yes.
to support children by re-entering childhood,
Yes.
and to like maybe not think for a little bit about the units of study,
Yeah.
but to think more about what is this childhood world like?
Yes.
How can we, because I mean, what one of the principals said last week in this ride is that the children can't do anything until they're healed,
Mhm.
until they're healed from the year, and they're feeling safe, and they're feeling comfort, and they're given this freedom. And I love the freedom that you're giving them, and I hope the teachers can have that kind of freedom
Yes.
also. So we could talk forever, because I can listen to both of you forever.
That's such a just hearing you say that makes me then also keep questioning how play and creation and making and materials are part of that healing.
Yes.
I mean, all those things, the play especially, are so healing.
Yeah.
Well, what I've been given the courage to do after our discussion with each other is tonight I'm going to go into a spider sleep. I'm going to be the spider, and I'm going to go to sleep, and I will have my spider dreams, and I will wake up in the morning knowing that I can see the world through the eyes of my spider. And it's quite amazing. Things I never saw before are going to be there. So that's where that, going back to the idea of community, we join the community, not only of the other adults in the world or other children, but the community of spiders, the community of life around us.
I love having your lens on this spider moment, Richard. Thank you. It's so beautiful.
Well,
It does. It helps us see it in a different way. It's more expansive. We're up above and able to sort of, it makes it more spiritual. It's more, you're connecting it in ways that we appreciate and the
Yes.
children appreciate
Let me
a
show you.
lot.
This is my spider bed, by the way.
Ooh, ooh, back to materials.
I
Yes.
can put it right next to my head like that. Spider sleep. I can't wait to have my, and by the way, before I have my spider sleep, I'm going to have my spider dinner, which should be absolutely delicious. I'm not gonna tell you
Yeah.
what I-
Will it be mac and cheese or pepperoni?
Oh, no, it'll be little threads of invisible things that nobody can see except me.
It will be poems. It will be words.
It'll be words, it'll be fragments of something.
Well, I want to thank both of you. This has been just
Wonderful.
a delight, and it's not just a delight, but an important conversation, I think.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. And
Hi, Richard.